If you turn around, you look at Belgian Village, or Fairhill Road Village, I guess is the official name. And it is, we'll get up close and you can see, but right while we're here, it's stucco and stone. And the stone is Berea sandstone, and that sits, the whole complex sits on a Berea sandstone promontory over Doan Brook. And so the stone of the buildings came from the brook itself, came from the gorge itself, okay? So we have this kind of chocolate-covered sandstone, right? It's the same sandstone that's on the door surround, but it's light. That's been cleaned. This Berea sandstone naturally weathers this dark brown. We'll see it in a few minutes down below. And it is that this, sandstone is sand grains, silica, and they're basically colorless, and then a cement that's a mineral of some type as well. And the sandstone cement here is three things basically, and one is various iron oxides, and they tend to make the buff color that you see in the door surround. The sand grains are clear basically, and then there's also some manganese dioxide and a sulfur mineral, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but they oxidize dark. Everything changes, so the honey locust trees are not, they're native trees, but not native to Ohio. And they're quite nice, especially this time of year. They have compound leaves, so tiny little leaflets on a bigger stem. That's the whole leaf. In any event, they come from the Dakotas area, I believe. But they became a fashion back in the 70s. So these trees are of the 70s. They're very nice, but they aren't big. What we're going to see in terms of everything is everything changes. Belgian Village, built just on top of the Berea sandstone. The stone for the chimneys and everything quarried right from the place. And the promontory in earlier times, centuries to a few thousands of years ago, came out farther, but it has collapsed. And I want you to see that there's the terrace upon which the buildings are built. Then it goes down, then there's another terrace here, then it goes down, another terrace here, and down, and finally a terrace there. These are what geologists call detached blocks. And what has happened here is that this sandstone is about 30 feet thick, okay? And underneath is shale. And the shale doesn't let water through, but the sandstone, it's good stone, but it's sandy and porous, so water can infiltrate down, rainwater, right down through it. It's always damp inside. But once that water gets to the shale, it can't go down. So you end up with a wet area. But if you're on the edge of a valley, a ravine, gorge like this, that water can work its way out and come out as springs. And as it does that, it takes just a little bit of the shale away, the support for the sandstone above it, and you get cracks, and then they break off. And so this is, three breaks right in here. 1, 2, and 3 here. So these are slowly headed down the hill. And I don't know, this could be a bunch of centuries old. These cracks could be 10,000 years old. I can't tell you that right now. All right. Okay, so the Berea sandstone was laid down in a delta 350 million years ago. It's the youngest rock we see today. And the noticeable thing about it is that it is in part oceanic, especially at its bottom. The sea was higher, there was more of a retreat to the shoreline, and the beds are thicker. But as time went on, either the sea receded or the river got bigger and began putting more fluvial elements, river elements, sediment, into this delta. And here we're at the top, and that shows the development of these deltaic deposits. And that comes as then the beds being thin. If you have this river in a delta and it's moving back and forth, it's depositing a thin bed before it moves someplace else. Then it comes back, another thin bed. So we talk about on top here flaggy beds, flagstone, thin beds, okay? Whereas down below where you can see here, it is the massive bedding of the Berea sandstone, and the beds, instead of being, just an inch and a half to 3 inches, 4 inches thick, they are 2 feet thick and thicker, okay? We're in the forest, okay? But the forest is nothing like it was 200 years ago, certainly not even 100 years ago. And in clearing, in timbering, timber for timber's sake, the trees were cut down, but also for charcoal. The whole Heights area had sustained for quite a while a good charcoal business to feed the heating and cook stoves of Clevelanders down below. Okay? So, as I said, this is not great farmland, so the trees were not cleared necessarily for pasturing or field crops, but for wood and charcoal. And what grew up since then has been quite opportunistic. So here we are in an area that has a number of wild cherry, black cherry trees, and these rough bark trees are all cherries, and they were the Moses Cleveland surveyors were required to keep notes on timber as they made their traverses. And so there are notebooks and notebooks of timber notes, and I have worked with some of these, and there's a botanist at Baldwin Wallace who got her students to look through all of these books for Cuyahoga County anyway, and has come up with a pretty good model of what the forest was back in 1796 to 1800. And it was, all forest. People talk about the prairies. There were not very many prairies here. And it was beech, which is the little one you see here. Beech was the primary tree. Beeches now are in danger. They're in trouble. Beech is lucky to be where it is. That's a young one. You don't see many young ones that make it because the deer come along and do them in. In any event, beech primarily, sugar maple, second, and a range of maples, and then a whole range of oaks. Cherry, tulip, they were cottonwood that you see out here, the rough bark tree. They were specialized and not common, okay? But they're opportunistic. They do well with what botanists call disturbance. And that means when you cut the trees down, you disturb. When you cultivate, you disturb. Of course, when you put a building in, you disturb. But anytime you disturb, then there are certain species that do better. Black cherry is one of those. Beech is not. Beech does not tolerate disturbance very well. So, beech has just been declining for 200 years. And climate change will eventually do it in because it's a cold weather tree. And there's a great variety of oaks in our area. And they maybe show the greatest environmental diversity, okay? Sugar maples are basically upland trees. You don't find them naturally so much on the lake plain, but Geauga County, is full of them, maple syrup and all that. Southern Lake County. But the oaks, on the floodplain, so, where I live in Euclid, we've got pin oaks from the old days all over the place. Red oaks are usually a lowland tree. Pin oak and red oak is almost the same tree. Then there is the white oak family, and they are more upland trees, and especially one that's called chestnut oak that in the Appalachians is called the ridgetop oak because it grows on top of the mountains, on top of the ridges, the rocky ridges. And I bring this up in part because there are two big families, the white oaks, so swamp white oak, chestnut oak, and white oak, and the red oaks, red oak, pin oak, and a couple of others. And there is an oak leaf. You get a red oak tree and the leaves turn yellow during the summer. Wilt, oak leaf wilt, that's coming into our region, and it seems to be affecting the red oak trees. Now, the white oaks used to be the dominant trees, but they don't like disturbance. The red oak trees, more disturbance, so they have come to dominate, and now maybe the red oak's on their way out, and we should start planting whites again. At one time, the Doan Gorge from Lower Lake, so Coventry, almost down to University Circle, was purchased in the 1860s, I believe, maybe 70s, by John D. Rockefeller. Okay? And that was at a time when he was buying Forest Hill And basically, he must have been an interesting man. You know, we know him as the kind of heartless Presbyterian, devout Presbyterian, but heartless entrepreneur, okay, mercantilist. And but he had to have loved these streams. He bought these things, consolidated them, built the big Forest Hill, but use this one, we'll see evidence of carriage paths that he installed, carriage ways, carriage roads, okay? And that is maybe, you know, I talked about the restoration phase starting in the 21st century. You might include Rockefeller's carriage paths as an amenity, a private amenity, but nevertheless an amenity. Here we are on a John D. Rockefeller carriage path, okay, carriage trail, and we will see evidence of retaining walls on the outer sides as we go along here. The big thing I want to say here is that this is the first, in the 1870s, the first kind of major transformation here in the gorge. And everything that has been done here has narrowed the floodplain. Okay? So you have to imagine that there's just, what, 30 feet, 40 feet of floodplain from the stream to this bank, that this pushed earth down there. But if you look over there, you see it's rubble. That is not natural at all. This gorge should be the cliff faces of the Berea sandstone and then the bluestone and the shale between them. It should be basically bare and whoop, doop, with the stream meandering there. And it's clear, we know exactly what happened here. Well, first of all, it goes back to the Shakers, and later on, people who quarried this sandstone a little farther upstream. What they didn't want, they just pushed down, and it's washing down. All this is quarry rubble, these big angular blocks, quarry rubble. But the big thing here is that in 1915, the construction began for the Baldwin Reservoir. Okay, that time, the Heights was becoming populated. People need water. You needed a reservoir up high, so you didn't have to pump it up from the lake. So the reservoir got built. You know how big that is? Yes, I do. They built a railroad. It's in there's a picture of a little locomotive on a trestle that's just, I think it's a little upstream. You can see remnants of it. And it came all along. It skirted, Belgian Village wasn't there then, but it skirted the front of Belgian Village, came along, and down here it crossed over at the Roxborough School level where there had been a big quarry, and they put, it's all bluestone underneath the Baldwin Reservoir, and they just dynamited it out, crushed it up, put it on these cars, and they dumped it all along here. Then they crossed over and they dumped it all along there. Okay? So that's where this gorge becomes narrow and V-shaped instead of, the original dimensions were no wider, but vertical walled and floodplained at the bottom. Okay? I'm talking about now this first phase of the Anthropogenic period, where it's use it as a resource. Who cares about it? It's just a scar in the earth. Let's take what we can out of it, and then we'll just fill it up with trash, basically. Now that we're here, part of the reason why we have this floodplain here is that we're on top of the Euclid bluestone now. And as we keep going on the trail, I'll point out that you can see the water then falling over beds of bluestone, and finally you get in the sides of the stream, you get the beds emerging as a part of the stratigraphy, part of the sequence of rocks here. So the Berea sandstone up there, we're in an area of shale right here, and then the bluestone just down there. And in this case, the floodplain, what's left of it happens to be on top of the bluestone. We start to pick up traffic noise, and you see that at our level, we're basically out of the gorge. I mean, there's the last part of it falls down here, and you look out over there and you don't see any land. So what this is, it's our two rock units, and they're resistant. They're harder than the shale. So what this means is that when the glaciers came through, starting 2 million years ago, we only have good evidence for the last one, came through about 23,000 years ago. But they went up this escarpment, and once they got on top of the bluestone, they could bulldoze the shale, and so make a terrace. And then Then they ran into the Berea, and once they got over that, they could bulldoze again. So Cleveland Heights is on two terraces, basically. You come up Cedar Hill, you get on top, you're on top of the Bluestone. So Nighttown, for example, and the new development there is on top of the Bluestone. But then you continue on, and you make the decision either Fairmount to go up or continue on. Whatever you do, you go up a hill, and that's the Berea then. So by the time you get to Coventry, you're on Fairmount, you're on the Berea. We're seeing a different set of bones here, or a different bone. The first big skeletal part of northeast Ohio that we saw up on top was the Berea sandstone. And number two is the Euclid Bluestone, and we're now on the top. So if you imagine that when we came in at Belgian Village off of Fairhill Boulevard, we were on top of the Berea. This just down here is the top of the Euclid Bluestone. And as we go down, the stream will cut through the Bluestone, and we'll see it get in the section, in the side bank, we'll see it be thicker and thicker and thicker till it's about 15 feet thick when we leave this area here, okay? And so this is lower, the Bluestone is lower than the sandstone. To put it another way, the Euclid is lower than the Berea, and if it's lower, it's older. So this was deposited in a sea about 370 million years ago. The Berea about 350 million years ago. And then way at the top at Tri-C East and all the ledges, the Heron is about 320 million years old. So, in geological time, that's not a long time. That's like 40 million years. Really, that's not a long time that we accumulate most of our bones, so to speak. And then it's uplifted and we get this sequence through here. So the Bluestone, flaggy beds, you see they're thin on top. They'll get thicker, you'll see this. And you see that the Bluestone is finer sand, it's silty sand, and the sand is silica, so it's clear. The cement, instead of being iron and sulfur, it's primarily calcite, which is kind of clear as well. So if you see that gray rock, you can imagine that that's one of those thin beds that floodwaters have ripped up and tossed over there. It's dried out and it's gray, as opposed to everything around it, which is a buff color. So that's the piece of Bluestone, and that's why it's called blue. It's gray, it's not blue. So there it is, and once again, we'll drop through this, and our next stop will be a set of Bluestone quarries, which are downstream here. All right, we have, our rocks, once again, the Heron, the Berea, and the Euclid. They all are stone with some economic value, at least in the old days. So you don't find too many stone houses in the Western Reserve, although there are a couple hundred of them. I have counted them all. There are about 230 sandstone houses, and in each case, you find them just about 100 yards from the quarry from which the rock was taken. And they were very popular in the 1830s. This is all to say that quarrying started in the earliest days here. We know about quarrying, the Berea sandstone quarries at Amherst, while they were operating, were the biggest sandstone quarries in the world. Berea was known as the grindstone center of North America, or something like that. That's all industrial, that's steam. Steam in the sense of tools to cut through the rock, to lift it, and then take it away on steam railroad, okay? But before then, going back to the 1810s, 20s, it didn't have that steam advantage, so people did things differently. And throughout these streams, if you look over there, you see a kind of crater, a round area. And on the far side is the Bluestone that has been quarried, and it's been broken away on this side. But for whatever reason, back in this man named Spencer quarried this back in the 1820s, they started on top at a point, and they dug out and they expanded and expanded concentrically. So you get these crater-like things in all of these streams. Doan Brook, Kingsbury Run, Dugway Brooks, 9 Mile Creek, and Euclid Creek. all have the same kind of feature that's, you know, that I can't find in the literature anywhere. So there's one there, and I think you can see that there's one over there, and yet there's one yet farther back that there's too much foliage to see. So these are the bluestone quarries of Doan Brook. That's a bluestone cliff over there. That's what we've been following. And by now the stream bed is down toward the bottom. And actually you see how it goes up. It's up, you can see the rocks go up, and the bluestone extends nearly to the top surface there. So it's about 30 feet thick here. And we're at the bottom of it right there. This is brand new to me. This is the last time I was here, which was, I guess, 2 years ago. There was the old trash rack, and they had tried to reinforce it on the eroding side, but it just blew through. So they abandoned that whole thing and put in this one, which is, the other one was on top of a concrete structure, so it was actually kind of a dam. And this one is just posts down into the riverbed so more water can get through. So this is part of this 21st century restoration phase of the anthropogenic change. This counts as a restoration in two senses. One, this is restoration in terms of let's restore this to be a functioning stormwater facility, management facility. So you get this done here. And then the idea is to create a place where the habitat can develop to be a little complex and draw some critters in, plant some nice trees, some shrubs, native plants. This work has to be done, otherwise we lose this beautiful stone culvert, all this other things. Okay, it's got to be done, but it's always a compromise. You do something with the knowledge and materials that you have at hand, and in retrospect, it always looks a little questionable. My generation looks at all the culverts that these streams are in and says, what were they thinking of 100 years ago when they put all these streams underground? It just doesn't make any sense. In 2011, the US EPA turned to the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District and said, you know, you just haven't paid attention to the Clean Water Act of 1972. You've got millions of gallons of polluted stormwater going into Lake Erie. You've had from 72 to 2011, so 40 years to take care of this, and you've not done anything. So we're reading you the Legal Riot Act, a consent decree to improve this in a hurry. And the response was twofold. The EPA also said, you know, we'll let you design, but it's got to meet our standards, but you need to have a green component to it. So the bulk of the response is what's called Project Clean Lake, which is the 8 storage tunnels. Euclid Creek Tunnel, Doan Brook Tunnel, the construction of which begins just down here. Okay? So that's the bulk of the consent decree response. But a small part of it is, those were 8 big storage tunnels. I think there are 6 or 7 of these green infrastructure installations. And this is, I think, the most expensive because it's on this hill. It's going through the bluestone down to the stream there. And the stormwater, the new sewers separated the sanitary and storm sewers finally and brings it into here, and the stormwater then can infiltrate down here. When it really gets flooding, there's some barriers to slow the water down in there. And there's a lot of water that comes in here during a big storm. And it is, you know, I wish we were seeing birds and dragonflies still at this time of October. But it's native plants, a range of plants that have deep roots, some trees, sycamore over there. That's what I call part of this restoration ethic.